Chronic diseases are on the rise among adults and children in Grenada. These diseases have been linked to the types of food that we consume. To deal with this rise, there is a need for proper scrutinizing of the foods that we eat, both homegrown and imported. Fishermen, farmers, agro-processors, and any other person in the food safety industry are being trained on effective ways of making our food safer for consumption, both for our locals and tourists alike. Our borders, which were not properly secured, are to be controlled, and there is a proper surveillance system put in place to deal with the importation of unsafe food. Farms and processing plants which are qualified enough to produce safe food will be issued certificates and are to be supervised. When standards drop, they can be decertified. Persons are to be trained on the requirements needed for a farm or a processing plant to be rendered qualified to provide safe food for our country. Healthcare practitioners are also taking action in this movement, advising the patients on the foods which are safer for them. We need to put our heads together to ensure we are fed safer, healthier foods to ourselves, families, and country on a whole.
Session. I'd like to say a pleasant welcome and good morning to everybody. I'd like to recognize the head table, Honorable Minister of Agriculture, Lands, Forestry and Fishery, Mrs. Yolande Bain-Hosford, Mr. Aaron Thomas, Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Health, Social Security and International Business. We have apologies for our PS Jessime. She won't be here this morning, so she sent our apologies. We'd like to welcome our consultant, Mr. Church. You want to stand so they can see who you are? Mr. Church, our consultant. We'd like to welcome him here. He is the one who will be leading today's session for you all. The national authorities, public and private sector officials, farmers, media, stakeholder, all. Welcome to everybody. Now this morning session is for you the stakeholders. It's not for us, it's for you the stakeholders who have an interest in the agricultural sector. Okay, so this agricultural health and food safety policy has to do with sanitary and phytosanitary measures. And it takes into consideration plant health, animal health, human health, and the environment. The 10th EDF SPS project, currently being implemented by ICA, is one of the components of the support to the Forum of Caribbean States in the implementation of the commitments undertaken under the Economic Partnership Agreement. The specific objective of the SPS program is to increase production and trade in agriculture and fisheries, which meet international standards while protecting plant, animal, and human health and the environment. Now, this project has done a lot for Grenada. I just want to focus on a few things. In 2014-2015, the project called for project proposal from Grenada. And we have what is called a National Technical Implementation Networking Team, comprising 8 members from different agriculture, health, and food safety organizations or units. And we put together 7 projects for the SPS project. And I must compliment the team. Team here, we have, who are the members? I can't see many members are not here. Derek, yeah, Derek is here, yes. So we put together 7 projects to the SPS committee to be funded. We were fortunate with 6, and we are lucky. Not all countries get that amount of projects. So I must say hats off to the team for putting the projects together. Okay, so we had projects like gap auditing, and which is an area that the Market Board is quite keen on doing, and I know they have started work in that area. We had projects like HACCP, Hazard Analysis and Critical Control Points. We had people trained. As a matter of fact, the SPS project trained 2 people from Grenada who can go ahead and train other people. In other words, the project was called Train the Trainer. So we have 2 people in Grenada with the capacity to train public and private sector officials in hazard analysis and critical control point. We have 1 person sitting here today, who is Mr. Kenley Edwards from the Marketing and National Importing Board. Okay. We revised the animal bill and the plant bill, animal health bill and the plant health bill. These bills were validated in Barbados, and we had a team from Grenada who were party to that validation. Okay. We had what is called a National Emergency Response for Highly Pathogenic Avian Influenza. We had a workshop in that area. Okay. And we had training in risk management, which is a very important aspect in agriculture, health, and food safety. One of the projects that were not in the scope of the SPS project was that of residue analysis in agricultural produce. So we didn't get that project. But this is an area that is also of interest to agriculture, health, and food safety. An additional project which we did not apply for, but we had training in that, is called a workshop on traceability. But prior to that, we had what is called a pilot project in Grenada, where we did the Cocoa Association, the Nutmeg Association, and the fisheries industry. A pilot, and it was very successful. Mr. James Nicholas is here, could testify to that. He actually gave a presentation at our traceability workshop held earlier last month. Okay, I must say the purpose of this policy framework that we are working on is to promote the production, processing, marketing, and consumption of safe foods and the prevention of new and re-emerging diseases in the agricultural sector and the environment. Okay. Effectively, it is hoped that the capacity of the public and private sectors will be improved and be able to apply the principles and practices of agricultural health and food safety to better manage pests and disease and to adopt practices and food safety standards to increase trade and to access markets. Now, what you're going to have today is when I discussed with the consultant, we looked at where Grenada is in terms of agriculture, health, and food safety system. Because you cannot have a policy and you don't know where you are. It may mean that you may need to increase certain protocols and certain practices, or you may have to develop new practices or new protocols to meet the SPS regime. So we looked at something they call performance, vision, and strategy. And we look at the fundamental aspects of that, okay? Which is basically interactions of the public and private sector, capacity to access international markets, and human and financial capital. From where I sit, I think we have a lot of human capital. I'm not sure about the financing, but the human capital, I can tell you, based on the SPS project, over the last 2.5, 3 years, there has been a number of training in capacity building in all different areas. And just to mention, when we submitted the projects, we got 6 of the 7 projects. That means that we know what we want in terms of SPS, okay? We actually know what we want. So this workshop here is going to say, what is our policy? It's your duty to tell us what is your policy. We could propose certain things, but it got to come from you, the stakeholders. What is our policy? And I just want to mention something which is of great concern since I mentioned pests and diseases. Yesterday we had a meeting, ICA had a meeting on frosty pod rot. And to me, it touches me when I know we don't have a proper system here to have indicator plans, to have early warning system, and to activate an early response system. Because frosty pod is a disease in cocoa, a fungal disease, pathogenic disease in cocoa, which affects the pod. Now, one of the good things about this, it can be eradicated. It's not like witch's broom where you go into the flowers and other things. You only affect the pod. And within 3 months, your pod could completely rot. Now, this fungus is spread on your clothes, packaging material, and the like. But do we have a system here to cater for that? What about our borders? Are we have proper control? When we look at agro-tourism, somebody could come from a country that is infected, and they could agro-tourism, they go to the countryside, and there you go. Boom, it's gone, you know. Just 2014, Trinidad built up the emergency response because that disease was prominent in Venezuela, 2014. Trinidad doesn't have it, but it's into Jamaica, and actually in the middle of the island. You know what I'm saying? What if that disease reaches here? You could lose 70% of your production just like that. Okay, so this is agricultural health and food safety. That's the message. You know? Agricultural health and food safety is important. So the message is the agricultural health and food, the importance of the agricultural health and food safety system. And the discussion going to center around things like what do we do in terms of plant indicators? What do we do about early warning system? What do we do about activating our response system, if there is one, you know? So these are the things that we have to focus on. And you're here to actually give your input in terms of what you like to see in your agriculture, health, and food safety system. Mind you, we are in the process where we're looking at climate-smart agriculture, and a lot of us looking at composting, using manure. Yes, we want to get away from the pesticides, the chemical pesticides, and we want to get away from the chemical fertilizer. But think about it, the risk. Manure, pen manure has a great risk, which we're not thinking about. Okay? So we have risk in terms of salmonella in the poultry litter. The people who have the deep litter system, salmonella is a very important thing. Okay? In cow manure, you have certain strains of E. coli. So these are risks that we are taking. In other words, we're trying to move away from a system, but we don't have checks and balances in place to deal with the new system we're trying to put in. So if many of the farmers decide to go into composting or manure for some reason, we might end up having to deal with problem of salmonella or E. coli. Are we prepared for that? So these are the things when we go into new things, we have to make sure that we analyze the situation carefully and be able to deal with the risk that may come with such a system. Okay, so as we stand, we know that there are certain principles to deal with pest and disease. And there's a principle called principle of inevitability. Now, in the case of Jamaica, Jamaica is trying to eradicate that disease, but it's just a matter of time before it spreads. Okay? Supposing somebody comes from Jamaica. As a matter of fact, we're trying to have a workshop next year in Trinidad to try to build awareness on this frosty pot disease. And they're saying they don't want to have it in Jamaica. They don't want to have the workshop in Jamaica because you don't want to bring people from the different countries in Jamaica that already have that disease. So they prefer to have it in Trinidad, where they have not identified that disease as yet. So you can have a disease to build awareness among the ICA countries as to what do we do next in terms of that kind of disease. So all these things are impacting on our agriculture, health, and food safety system, which we need to put in place. I think I had enough about that. So I just want to say thank you very much. And we're looking forward to your contributions to a robust agricultural health and food safety policy that will stand the test of times. Thank you very much for this brief remarks and introduction. I'd now like to call on Mr. Aaron Francois, who you all know very much. He used to be the Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Agriculture 3 years ago, and he is now the Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Health, Social Services, and International Business. Welcome, Mr. Francois.
Thank you, Mr. Charles, head of the of ICA here in Grenada. I want to recognize Honorable Yolande Hosford, the Minister for Agriculture, Forestry, Fisheries, Lands, Mr. Michael Church, the consultant on this initiative, the project that we are going to look at today regarding policy, integrated agricultural health and food safety issues. And certainly I want to also recognize some familiar faces I'm seeing here this morning and all of you participants. I want to thank ICA for certainly asking us from the Ministry of Health to be a part of this very, very important initiative here today. From the Ministry of Health, while we deal more with the food safety issues, we cannot disjoint agricultural health and food safety. They are integrated. In other words, if the practices in the field or in food production chain is not one that facilitates the production of wholesome food, you know the food safety issues will ultimately be affected. In other words, from the Ministry of Health, we are concerned very much about the food that we eat, how safe it is. Okay? And we know that food historically has played a very, very pivotal role in terms of human survival. We cannot underestimate that. Food plays a primary role. We cannot go without food. And so, but it is also important that the food that we get, that it is safe for consumption. And I'm heartened that when I heard Mr. Charles speaking about the issue of HACCP, persons being trained in those initiatives, to ensure that procedures are followed in terms of reducing risk and that people are using practices that will allow us to produce the safe food that we really want to consume. But there is another issue about food that I want you to bear in mind. The relationship between food and diseases. We also know historically that there is a very, very strong relationship between food and diseases. And if you think I'm joking about that, even now more than ever, in an age of globalization, the connection is coming out more and more. People are always bombarded with this issue of, and with the connection between food and diseases. We are continually faced in Grenada, and we have a very small population comparatively, just over 100,000 people. But the burden, the disease burden is tremendous. You see the incidence of the chronic non-communicable diseases upon our population. You can talk about the cancers, major killers, hypertension, diabetes. Yeah? And all of them, the main killers, all of them are strongly related to food, kind of a food that we take in. And while we have those diseases that are killing people, we in the Ministry of Health are facing the cost of trying to heal people, to bring recovery in their health. And that cost burden is a huge one also. I can tell you just to operate, and annually, just to operate the General Hospital alone, and I'm not talking about all the health facilities scattered across the nation. An estimate sometime in 2011 indicated we were spending over $20 million annually to operate only the General Hospital. Yeah? So you understand what we're talking about. And so this initiative here today is very, very important in terms of integrating the issue of agricultural health and food safety. Of course, we are concerned, as I said, more about the food safety, so we do interfaces in terms of the consumer side. There is a food safety bill that has been passed, and we have challenges still in implementing it, and so we do training of persons to make sure that they're following proper safety practices and so on in terms of preparation of food. And of course, as I said, we have a fleet of health practitioners across the nation teaching people about eating healthy and helping to keep them away from getting sick. But, ladies and gentlemen, the issue of globalization is playing an increasing role in our food chain and food safety issues. While we have a small population, you must know that Grenada is a net importer of food. In other words, our food requirements are satisfied primarily by imports, if you didn't know. And so we must not just, it is not just important for us on the issue of agricultural health and food safety issues to look internally, but on a broader scale, we must have a mechanism that would help us monitor and have a surveillance system, a management system, whether or not, wherever the food comes from, that our population is consuming wholesome food. Yeah? It is important. And I believe that the policy is seeking to do that. It is seeking to put in place this mechanism, this monitoring mechanism that would help us to do that. Bringing health and agriculture closer together in terms of the issue of food safety. More and more, we cannot escape it. People are coming to our shows. We are a tourist country. People are coming in here all the time. And so it is not just for our population, but we have an obligation to protect our visitors also. Yeah? And so this exercise today is very, very important. And I want to commend ICA in leading the charge on it. And certainly for you who would have contributed in the preliminary development of the framework. And as you deliberate here today, I want to ask you to give your utmost to making sure that the result that we get here from here today would really help in terms of strengthening our food safety agenda, so that both our people and all those who would come through our shows would feel safer, would feel more confident that the food that we are consuming on this island is one that is wholesome and safe for consumption. So again, I want to wish you all the best and good luck. Thank you very much.
There you had it. That's the policy. Okay, so food, wholesome food. Thank you, Mr. Francois. So I'd like to call to the podium now Honorable Minister Yolan Bain Hosford to give the feature address. Honorable Minister.
Thank you very much, Mr. Charles. But after listening to P.S. Francois, I might as well sit down. He gave a good delivery here this morning. Mr. Derek Charles, National Specialist from ICA, Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Health, Social Security, and International Business, Mr. Aaron Francois, what's happening with us this morning? Senior officers of the Ministry of Agriculture, I see here Mr. Daniel Lewis, Mr. Charles, and also fisheries. We have Mr. Michael Church, consultant, who has prepared or is preparing the food safety policy. Other invited guests here this morning, members of the media. A pleasant good morning to all of you. Let me say from the onset how exceedingly pleased I am to be present here this morning at this very important consultation on the agricultural health and food safety policy. And even more gratifying is to have been given the opportunity to address you here this morning. Ladies and gentlemen, while enormous efforts have been made post-Hurricane Ivan, geared at the rehabilitation of the pivotal agri-food sector, following what was tantamount to the virtual dissemination of this very important economic sector of the economy, where the major emphasis had been principally on prioritizing the resuscitation of the major crops, such as cocoa, banana, nutmeg, and other spices, roots and tubers, vegetables, etc., while at the same time improving the infrastructure of roads and propagation stations. Other major actions which have been carried out by the ministry over the last decade or so have been natural resources management, where substantial resources provided by both the government and donor funding have been expended in supporting projects which have been geared at managing in a more sustainable and judicious manner soils, forestry, marine resources, biodiversity, water resources, etc. The establishment of marine protected areas in Grenada, for example, are aimed at protecting and conserving marine species and habitats, sustainable land management and the land degradation projects which have been implemented a few years ago, specifically targeted management of land and soil resources. The Ridge to Reef project, which is now being implemented, seeks to curtail deleterious and unsustainable farm and household practices that negatively impact the freshwater and marine environment and, by extension, biodiversity. Human resource capacity building, where stakeholders at all levels, that is farmers, extension agents, and other officers of the Ministry of Agriculture, fisherfolk, agro-processors, etc., are continuously being trained in a plethora of subject matters aimed at improving technical capability, which is expected to be translated into higher levels of productivity in the sector, enhancement of the legislative agenda of the agri-food sector, given the fact that many of the legislation governing the agri-food sector, by and large, are antiquated and do not meet the current end of an industry which is changing in such a rapid manner. The ministry has been dedicating a lot of effort in addressing that anomaly, and I am very pleased, colleagues, to inform you that we have been making steady progress in that respect. Development of critical infrastructure, farm and feeder roads, propagation stations, improvement in diagnostic laboratories, etc. Implementation of major interventions to address effects of climate change. Example, the Integrated Climate Change Adaptation Strategies project, which have so far supported the development of climate-smart agriculture approaches, development of coastal zone management policies, etc. Distinguished colleagues, while natural resources management, human resource capacity building, enhancement of the legislative agenda, development of infrastructure, etc., are all very important and are vitally important in pushing the agriculture development agenda forward. Issues related to agricultural health and food safety have become in recent times an indispensable tool in ensuring that the agri-food sector become competitive and relevant, and for which have been obliged to place immense attention to. Trade in many products are now governed by a growing array of food safety and agricultural health standards. These have been developed to address various risks, including those associated with microbial, pathogens, pesticides and veterinary pharmaceuticals, environmental contaminants, for example, heavy metals such as cadmium, and naturally occurring toxins, for example, mycotoxins, and the spread of plant pests and animal diseases. Colleagues, the increased attention to food safety and agricultural risk stems in part from scientific advances, but it is also substantially driven by shifts in consumer demand and by a series of food safety scandals and disease outbreaks in many developed countries. Over the last few years, there have been challenges related to food safety, particularly in Europe and the USA. Remember the mad cow disease, the bird flu, the HINI, etc., which have forced these countries to impose more stringent import requirements on exporters. About 2 years ago, the USA enacted a Food Safety Modernization Act. The rule establishes, for the first time, science-based minimum standards for the safe growing, harvesting, packing, and holding of fruits and vegetables grown for human consumption. This obliges exporting countries to meet the food and health standards required by the USDA, and for countries like Grenada, who exports to that country, would have to put the requisite systems in place for compliance. Colleagues, similarly, the European Union have imposed standards with respect to maximum residue levels of cadmium in cocoa, which implies that cocoa now being exported from Grenada to the European Union would have to meet those standards. Gone are the days when products exported from Grenada, whether cocoa, bananas, or nutmeg, were not subjected to that rigorous level of scrutiny. Essentially, ladies and gentlemen, export of agricultural products are becoming more and more difficult with regards to the adherence of sanitary and phytosanitary standards and food safety requirements. So what Grenada needs to do to ensure compliance with SPS and food safety standards? Some of the key interventions needed to ensure compliance with SPS and food safety standards include, but not limited to, build awareness among all stakeholders across the food value chain on the importance of adherence to strict food safety standards, and this would involve training of all persons involved in the sector, including producers, marketers, agro-processors, technical officers, etc., in the SPS, agricultural health, and food safety systems. Development of farm certification programs where farms would have to be certified, and when standards drop, impose decertification of these farms. Special training for a cadre of technical persons to certify farms and other establishments, as example, processing plants. Development of a robust monitoring program to ensure compliance to food safety standards. Development of an effective National Agricultural Health and Food Safety Authority with a mandate to push the national food safety agenda forward. Work closely with Caribbean Agricultural Health and Food Safety Authority. Keep up to date with all developments which are taking place at the global level with respect to food safety issues so that these can be quickly communicated to key players at the national level. Enact legislation which would seek to strengthen SPS and food safety development in Grenada. There is a need to train more persons in Grenada in technical areas related to SPS and agricultural health and food safety. Ladies and gentlemen, I am exceedingly pleased to inform you that while we in Grenada have a lot to do to attain the comfort zone with respect to agricultural health and food safety, I am comforted by the fact that a number of initiatives have been taken over the last few years to ensure that agricultural health and food safety is placed on the front burner. A National Agricultural Health and Food Safety Committee has been set up. The OECS Commission and ICA have been providing support through training and other interventions in this area here. In 2015, a food safety bill was passed in Parliament. Under the 10th EDF-funded Caribbean SPS project, a plant health and animal health and food safety bills have been developed for the region. Grenada is obviously a beneficiary of that initiative. The Grenada Bureau of Standards have been conducted training in food safety standards for a number of years, now in areas such as HACCP and traceability, etc. And you have heard your ICA representatives spoke briefly on that earlier on. It is with my sincerest hope that the consultation today on the draft policy on agricultural health and food safety would be a very fruitful and highly productive one. I see we have the expertise in the room here. We have people representing different agencies and different organizations. We have the Ministry of Agriculture, and of course, we have our consultant who is well rounded in that area, who has the expertise to pull all the information together and come out with a grand policy here. Let me take this opportunity in conveying the Ministry's deepest appreciation and gratitude to the Inter-American Institute for Cooperation on Agriculture, ICA, and by extension, the regional SPS project, for providing the financial assistance which made it possible to develop that draft policy. I'm also obliged to thank Mr. Michael Church for laboring assiduously in putting together the policy. I hope that after the consultations today and tomorrow, that with the expected inputs and critiques from Grenada, would end up with a very high-quality policy on agricultural health and food safety policy, which would be the envy of many in the region, and that same would be submitted to Cabinet as soon as possible for its endorsement. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I wish you all the best as you go forward this morning.
Thank you very much, Minister, for a very thorough assessment of what we need to do. I think there are a lot of